Okay, so Rudy and Gloria, do you have a clean baby now? Did the shower go okay?
Yeah, we don't have a baby yet, but
So Rudy and Gloria, do you have a clean? So you had a successful shower, huh? Even without the baby. Nope, they dropped off.
Robert,
Hey,
is Martha doing better?
yeah, as of yesterday when we went by to see her, we went to the hospital and visited with her for a while, and she was much better. And so she says, "Yeah, I'm." She says, "I'm ready to fight this now." So that was a good thing.
That's good. That's good. I've been praying for her. Yeah, I ask God to give her strength, peace, and courage to fight and hope.
Yeah,
Yeah, I hope she's getting much better.
yeah, I think so. We told her, well, we prayed with her, and then from there we went over to her house and prayed for her husband, Ray, so that because he's going into the hospital on Monday for a procedure. Um, And so, she was a little worried about him. So she asked us if we would go over there and just, encourage him, say a few words, pray with him. So that's what we did. We went over there. And so, yeah, it was a very full day yesterday. By the time we finally got home last night is about, well, my daughter called and asked us, he says, "Hey, can you swing by here on the way home and we'll close out Shabbat with Havdalah?" And I said, "Yeah, we can do that." So we went by her house for a little while and then went on home. And um, and then fortunately, we rolled the clocks back an hour uh, last night, so we were able to kind of recoup a little bit of sleep there.
That's good. That's good. Yeah.
But yeah, it was a good day. We had a successful day. So. Hey Carl, are you in Wisconsin or Florida?
I'm in Florida now. I got back around Columbus Day. So
Okay. So where
that's
do
base
you go ahead?
I basically go up around the 1st of June
Hmm.
because the black flies are about done by then, and you just deal
Oh,
with the mosquitoes. And then I get back around Columbus Days because you don't have the oppressive 90 plus humidity anymore in Florida then. And we get to see the leaves turn and that. We get some pretty good color up there. And we're
yeah.
really far north in Wisconsin, so we have a much earlier fall than most places have. So anyway,
Well,
that's
good.
basically the way I work it.
Okay, well, good. So I guess do you vote in Florida or do you vote in
Yes,
Wisconsin
my
or both?
residence is Florida. I
Okay.
just, I'm really technically not a snowbird because snowbirds are northern people that's escaped the cold to come to. I know I'm a resident of Florida. I just summer in northern Wisconsin.
There you go. There you go. That's probably a good way to do it. Good deal. All right. So is iPhone Ed and Colette?
We're here.
You're here. Okay. Well, I'm going to change your name there so I'll know who it is. So, Did you go see your baby yesterday?
No, they went to the zoo.
Oh, okay. Well,
I missed out on it. Oh well.
yeah. It would have been a nice day to go to the zoo yesterday. It was not too hot and it was a wonderful day.
Yeah, they had fun. I'm glad they had fun as a family together.
Yeah. Yeah. A good deal. Good deal. I don't know if you were listening to, but we did go by and see Martha Williams yesterday after
Oh,
the service,
good.
and she was feeling 100% better, 1,000% better than she was Thursday night, because she had gotten so dehydrated that she didn't realize it, and it was, things were shutting down, and so they got her into the hospital and pumped her full of fluids, and she was still on two IV drips when we were there, and um, she was feeling much, much better. And by the time we got done talking to her, well, first of all, Scott and Lori went over there, and Lori talked to her about how that she had the same symptoms that Martha had with the pancreatic cancer, and that so that God healed her from that, and I told her some stories about some of our Coast Guard people that we talked about during our Saturday Zoom call, our Friday Zoom call, and things like that. Tried to lift her up and encourage her, and so when we left there, it was much much better,
Oh, praise
condition. So,
God.
yeah, so I felt really really good about that. And then from there, we went over to her house and prayed with Ray because he's going in the morning for a relatively minor procedure. Of course, the difference between major surgery and minor surgery. If it's on you, it might be minor. If it's on me, it's major.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So
Well, I'm glad you guys gave her hope and got her spirits up. And
yeah, it was real good. We just I got over there and we just let the ladies talk. That's all we did. See, so because Pat, they got in there and they started talking. I don't know, Billy Rubens and then Bobby Joes and all these different kind of names for different things. And I go, okay. Uh, so
well, I'm
yeah.
glad you guys
I
got to see
remembered a
her.
name. I remembered one thing from Billy Rubin because I had run into that years ago in an investigation I was doing for a seaman, merchant seaman that had died on a ship, and I was doing the investigation on it, and I did a lot of research on that. What was and that was one of the things with blood levels and stuff like that, trying to figure out how he died, why he died,
Yeah.
and so that was one of the things that it was Billy Rubin. I just remember that name. I have no idea what it means, but anymore. But that was, gosh, that was 40 years ago, 45 years ago, something like that, when I was investigating stuff in New Orleans. So.
My
Anyway, all right. I think we're about ready to go. We're a couple of minutes over. We've got our uh, minion here tonight, and so we'll go ahead and get started. And they're going to be a really interesting. I think it's going to be an interesting study tonight. And let me go ahead and mute everybody right now. And then if you need to say something, you just unmute yourself. And um, let's begin with the blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lasoch b'divrei Torah. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe. Sanctifies us with his commandments and commands us to engross ourselves in words of Torah. Okay, got one last thing to do, and that's record this to my computer. How about that? All right. So we're there. And so, before we get going, are there any comments or questions on last week anything that we said or didn't say that you wanted to comment on before we continue on tonight? Okay. So let's, and again, I wanted to welcome everyone in here tonight. That I don't see that we don't have any newbies here, any visitors. Everybody here's old hat. So there again, if you got something to say, just unmute yourself and we'll just discuss it away. All right, so let's look at I left these the timelines and so forth so that you can go back and try to think of some of these things um, that we're looking at. And so here we are with verse 1 of chapter 4. Then the angel who had been speaking with me returned and woke me like a man who is awakened from his sleep. So, this vision that we're looking at here with Zechariah. Remember the last week they talked about Zerubbabel and well, mostly it was Joshua. They talked about Joshua, the high priest, and so this vision here, though, is going to be kind of for both of Zerubbabel and Joshua, to remind them of God's resources and how that they were he vindicated these leaders in the eyes of the Israelites, because remember, they were trying to rebuild the temple, and there was like 16 years in there where they didn't do that because there was pressure from the surrounding bad guys and the Samaritans and other ones that were just trying to keep the temple from being rebuilt. And so it was just easier to, go along, get along. And so they just worked on building their houses and stuff without working on the temple. And then finally, Haggai came in, told them, we got to start working on the temple, guys. And so then that's what they started doing that. And I'm sure that they caught some flack from the locals, and so they really did need to have a little bit of encouragement here. And I think this is what this vision does. And toward the end of it, we'll see how that it points toward the Messiah and his role as a king and a priest. And so anyway, we'll go ahead with that. The angel speaking with him woke him up. He just woke up Zechariah, and so that kind of tells me, okay, what was the nature of his visions? Were they nighttime, like dreams or something like that, that he would have had to been awakened from the dream? So we really don't know, but Zechariah describes it himself that the angel woke him up like a man that was deep in sleep. Can you imagine an angel waking up and he says, "Hey Zeke, wake up, bud, wake up!" And and he wakes up, and I don't know about you, but when I wake up in the morning, I have to kind of sit on the side of the bed and get my bearings and so forth, and then before I get up, because at this age, I used to be able to jump out of bed, go about my business without sound effects. But now, I sit on the bed and I creak and crack and okay, get all of the kinks out, then I can finally get up and wander off. But and so I kind of look at Zechariah that way. Some people are just hard to wake up, and he said, that like a man awakened from his sleep. So some people, they can wake up and be right ready to go, and I used to be able to do that, and nowadays it takes me a little bit longer to rouse myself and get going, because I look over there in the bed and think, man, could I go back and get another hour? Nah, I don't know. Once 6 o'clock rolls around, I'm ready to go in the morning. So anyway, um, so he was awakened from maybe sleep rather than aroused from a vision, where the angel gets up in front of him and says, "Hey, Zeke," like that. And so that's just funny that the way that was written anyway. And he said, he asked me, the angel says, he asked me, "What do you see?" And I replied, "Behold, I see a solid gold menorah with its bowl at the top of it, and its 7 lamps on it, with 7 pipes for the lamps that are on top of it." All right. So now, here, this angel asked Zechariah, "Okay, what did you see?" And he talked about it. He said, "Well, he saw this lampstand and a golden bowl, and you know, um, lampstands. Generally they're talking about a lampstand, the menorah in the tabernacle or in the temple, and they had removable bowls. Actually, the what we see as a menorah. Up on top of that, they didn't have candles. Okay, candles were not invented for many, many hundreds of years later. They had these bowl things that they put oil in, and they hung a wick up in it, and then the wick would burn it with olive oil. And in fact, I have made emergency lanterns out of a mason jar and a coil of wire that holds the wick up, and put olive oil in there, and it makes um, a nice little lantern, or something that in an emergency you could use this thing, especially if you get you a mason jar, that like a jelly jar, that's got the little handle on the side, because then it doesn't get hot, and you can use that. And the good thing about it is, if you spill it, turn it over, the olive oil is not gonna spurt into big flames like a kerosene lamp would do. And maybe not as bright, but you can get by. It's one of those prepper kind of a thing. It's kind of cool anyway. But generally, it's just kind of a little bowl with olive oil in it, and a wick in it. So um, there's all sorts of interpretations of it as to what it was. And symbolically, a lampstand represents um, and it supports whatever is bearing the light, like the menorah with the arms up, and then on the top, it's that bowl that sits up in there, and it lights it. And so this particular one, though, was a little different, I think. And these, we see menorahs represented throughout the Old Testament, certainly in the New Testament. And even Yeshua described us, we people, his followers, as people that have our own light. He says in Matthew 5:16, it said that um, let your light shine before men, so that they may see your good works and glorify the Father in heaven. So we're to be a light in that way. And so in Revelation 1:20, talk about the 7 golden menorot. Menorot is plural for menorah. It's not menorahs, it's menorot. And so you have you have that in Revelation, and then later on in Revelation, it talks about one of the churches. If you said, "Repent and do the deeds that you did at first. If not, I will come to you and remove your menorah from its place, unless you repent." So that's not in my notes, but that's one of those things where people say, talk about the once saved, always saved thing. Well, the Lord said, if you don't keep following His word and doing what you're supposed to do, He'll remove your menorah from its place. Well, your menorah would not have been in its place to begin with if you had not been saved, and so He can take it away if you quit following his word and fall into disobedience. We're not going to go there tonight, but that's if you have a question about that, email me and we'll talk about it. So, um, but in Timothy, 1 Timothy 3:15. Paul called the community of Messiah the pillar and the support of the truth. And the purpose of the congregation is to support individual believers, the rest of the people in the congregation, who also bear the light of God's truth in a very dark world. And so ultimately, we know that the light is the Lord Himself. But we're also to reflect that light, as one of my sermons a couple of weeks ago talked about, reflecting the light of God. So um, anyway, the so what I think what we're people you understand what we're talking about here is this lampstand with some kind of lights on top, and so um, there's different kind of lampstands that they have excavated over the years, and then this one they talk about 7 lamps, and um, so and even with that, you get people that said, well, the seven tubes to 7 lamps, and they were talking about 7 lamps or 7 tubes into each lamp. And I look at it and said, no, that's 1 tube into each lamp, and so it gets really funny. Some of the different interpretations, and the bowl at the top. I haven't found any resource that talks about a bowl on the top of the lampstand, because before, the tabernacle they would have to uh, go in every day and trim service the little lamps, make sure that there's oil in there enough to burn throughout the night, and they would then make sure that there was enough wick in there, and so forth. So it had to the oil in those lamps would run out, if you just let them go. And so that was the miracle of Hanukkah, which they didn't have enough oil and they put them in there anyway, and the oil burned for 8 days, and the lights burned for 8 days. And then, of course, you have the critics that get in there and say, "Oh no, that could never have happened." Well, I mean, crossing the Red Sea could not have happened either, except for, Moses having the Army Corps of Engineers with this pontoon bridge that went across the Red Sea. Wait a minute, it didn't happen like that, did it? You get what I'm talking about. Miracles happen, and you're silly to deny them. All right, so anyway, here's a 7 spouted lamp that was found at Tel Dothan in Israel, and I don't know if you've ever seen a 7 spouted lamp before, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Well, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All right, so there's one of them, and so this vision that he said, that had seven lamps. Could it have been something like that with the wicks coming out of it? Who knows? Just said a lampstand. So here's one interpretation, that they had the oil that's coming out of the fig tree. I mean the olive tree, and of course this is not like a maple tree where you stick something in it and it just drips out of the sap. No, that's it. You'd have to have pressed olives and things like that. But this is an artist interpretation of it, of a golden bowl, and then from there you had the tubes or the pipes going down into the top of the menorah. Okay, that's one person's interpretation. It's a little bit fancy and whimsical, but anyway, that's one interpretation of it. And I found another one that here's another thing. Now he's getting a little bit better, in that the pipes are actually coming from the olives and not from the trunk of the tree, but they go into the bowl here, and then from there, each lamp has a pipe or a tube that goes to it to replenish it. And I don't know how that would work because the hydraulics of that, if you had the lamp up here and these tubes going into there, I just the engineer in me looks at that and said, no, that would never work because the oil would just overflow it. Um, and I know Alan and Joseph, they're also engineers, and and maybe they can back me up on that or tell me how that doesn't work. But anyway. That's one interpretation. And then now here's one that I generated today with going back and forth with my AI assistant, my Mr. Copilot. And so it was this was the final product that we came out of it, okay? Now, I will tell you a little funny here. Because the next one, if you looked over these slides at all, okay, um, this was the AI that I found or that I generated after several iterations of it because they had a nine, they had a Hanukkah there instead of a menorah, and the nine lights instead of seven, and the AI came back and says, "Oh yeah, my bad. It's only supposed to be seven," and but you got to watch AI. If you're going to use it, you got to pay attention to it and watch it because it's not perfect. Because right before I was doing this, when I first got up this morning, I've been going back and forth with my brother about uh, a um, a Bowflex machine, so that I could maybe work on it and maybe get rid of some of my girth. All right, and Pat's been on to me to, you know, get the weight down, get the belly off. So I said, well, I need something that's that I can work on, and I was getting on the floor and trying to do sit-ups. I cannot do sit-ups like that anymore. So anyway, I was looking at Bowflexes and comparing them, and I told AI, give me a comparison of all of these different Bowflexes and other things so that I can make a little bit of informed decision. Well, then the next thing I said, okay, give me an image of this lampstand and trees as per Zechariah 4, 2, and 3. All right. And so this is what I got. Here's the lampstand, and Zechariah's looking there at his angel, and there you got the trees and the bowl way up there. And then right smack in the middle of it is the Bowflex machine. All right. So it's just you do have to check up on your AI because they will throw you for a loop sometimes, and that's why I use it a little bit. I've been playing with these images, and I kind of like playing with that. But in terms of taking anything that AI comes up with as gospel, I don't do that because they'll come up and tell me something. Well, then I go and take it and research it and make sure that before I put it out there anywhere, that yes, it is correct. And they did give me the right information because I have caught it several times and I go back to them and says, hey, that is not right. This is what's right. And they go, oh yeah, you're right. My bad. And we go on. So, Scott and Laura, you had a comment.
I just had to say that's absolutely hilarious that Bowflex ended up in the middle of that.
Yeah,
That's hilarious.
when I first saw it, it was just a little image, and I couldn't, I couldn't figure what in the world is that thing, and then I blew it up, and I says, "Oh my gosh, it's a exercise machine," and it turns out it's not even a Bowflex because it's a weight machine where you got pulleys and it picks up the weights and stuff. So I didn't even get that.
Hilarious.
And so anyway, but that was the funny of the day that when that one came out. So anyway, all right, so let's go on. It said um Also, two olive trees are by it, one on the right side, one on the of the bowl, and the other on the left side of it. And so, with that, there is an olive tree on either side of the of the bowl. And on this particular one, human maintenance was unnecessary because the oil was flowing directly from the trees into the reservoir and into the lamps. And this is an important feature because in this vision, because it stresses God's provision of the oil that uh, he was going to be blessing Israel and Jerusalem, and he would provide the everything that they needed without people having to intervene. So that was, that's one of those things that, yeah, you look at that and it says, oh yeah, now I see that. And so they would always have a good supply of oil. They never would be like in the Hanukkah story where they ran out of oil. No, this would be supplied by God, and He never runs out. And so, and we see that the two trees represent Joshua the high priest and Zerubbabel the governor, and he's actually in the line of David, but they couldn't call him a king at this point because the Babylonians said, "No, no, no, we don't want any king back there. But you can be the governor, you can be the head, the big Kahuna there, but we're just not going to call you a king." So, and so these guys. Some people say, well, the two olive trees represent Joshua and Zerubbabel, and other people say, well, no, that this represents the it's a prototype of the two witnesses that were evangelizing in Revelation 11:3 to 12. Okay, so I don't know. I can't make that leap with this because he's talking directly to Joshua and to Zerubbabel, and not going quite that far. And but a lot of the commentaries that I was reading did try to make that leap that okay, yeah, this is a vision of the millennial period, and maybe it was, but getting that detail that these two trees were the two witnesses. I don't know. I'm not ready to make that kind of leap. Maybe somebody else is. If you can convince me of it, that's fine too. I mean, I'm not gonna fight you over it. But um, the two olive trees are important in Jewish theology because it played a part in the founders, of the modern Jewish state. Their perception of the state of Israel was some of it was based on this scripture right here in Zechariah, and their what do you call their official symbol that they had was there you got the menorah with the olive trees on either side. Okay, I bet you never thought about that, did you? Neither did I until I studied this. But and this is a representation of the menorah. You can see that also in Jerusalem over there, close to the Kotel and the Western Wall, and it's quite impressive, the golden menorah that they've got there. All right. So, any comments or questions on any of that so far? All right. So, um, verses 4 and 5. Then I responded by saying to the angel speaking with me, "What are these, my Lord?" The angel who spoke with me responded by asking me, "You don't know what these are?" And I replied, "No, my Lord." So the Zechariah asked the angel for an explanation of what he saw. He just wasn't getting it, and of course, then the angel came back and said, "What? You don't know what this means?" It's like it was so simple, and Zechariah admitted, "Nope, I don't know the answer." So, perhaps this interchange back and forth was recorded to help us realize that God Himself sometimes has to interpret visions and revelation. And otherwise, it's impossible for human beings to understand it otherwise. And, then I think about the passage in James, book of James in 1:5 it is, where it says, "If any of you lack wisdom, then ask God, and He will give it to you, give you the answers freely. He'll give you wisdom freely." So this idea that you with Zechariah, he didn't know the answer. He didn't understand what he was seeing. So rather than just going on in his ignorance, he said, "What does this mean? I don't know what this means." And the angel says, "What? You don't know what this means?" He said, "No, I don't know what it means." He was not embarrassed about it. Doesn't seem to be anyway. And that so he was, he didn't grasp the full picture yet. And maybe that's because he had not had a dream about Zerubbabel at this point. Remember, he had the last week we studied on the dream of Joshua, the high priest. And so Zerubbabel, he's in the future here. We'll get around to him, but he hadn't put those two together yet. And so it is, even today we look at have all these theologians, and I don't know how many uh, of them that I've read this week on, their interpretations of this, and it's almost like, when you ask Jewish people or what, you got two Jews, you got three opinions. Well, it's kind of the same with theologians, and that's why whenever anybody wants to criticize the Talmud for having saying one thing over here and over here that's saying the exact opposite on the same subject and so forth. And so I point to all of these commentaries that I get, and uh, one of them, one book I was reading this week, they were talking about how that basically he was a pre-tribulation rapture guy, trust that kind of standard stuff there. And so I had to kind of gag my way through what he was reading because he kept saying that the Messiah was going to come back and he was going to take all of these people out of the earth and away from the earth, and then it's just going to leave the whole 7 years for all those Jews and other sinners, and so, uh, I'm reading the book for a different purpose, but then when I came onto that one, I just had to hold my nose and go on through it and read it. But um, yeah, I've got books scattered out all over the house that I read. So, just where I happen to be sitting at the time. I just wish I had one that wouldn't, if I would leave it outside, it wouldn't get rained on or tore up. And so I could leave one out there, but I hadn't figured that one out yet. So, anyway, going ahead, with this, and please, if you have any questions or comments, jump in here. Verse 6, then he responded to me by saying, "This is the word of Adonai to Zerubbabel, saying, Not by might nor by power, but by my Ruach, says Adonai Svaot." And so, that's one. If you're in the old gospel churches stuff, there's that song, "Not by might, not by power, but my spirit, says the Lord of hosts." And so that I've heard that song all my life. Well, this is where it comes from, and so we have to remember that Zerubbabel was leading the effort to rebuild the temple. Remember that they'd gotten there. I mean, yeah, Zerubbabel was. They got there, in Jerusalem from the first wave of exiles coming back, and they started working on the temple, and then they got such pushback from these guys that were the locals there that I can never remember their names, so that I have to write it down. Um, um, so um, anyway, they had gotten kind of discouraged in a way, 16 years that they just let it languish. They worked on their houses because, well, the locals would not deny them the ability to work on their houses, as long as they didn't also start working on the walls of Jerusalem. But you could build your houses so that you'd have a place to live, because they didn't like homeless set on the street corners trying, with their signs saying hungry. They wanted people to live in houses. And so, but like I had said before, Zerubbabel was in the Davidic line. So if anybody could have been a king, possibly he could have been a king. And so they had started, Haggai had got them going into rebuilding the temple. And it was hard work. There was a lot of pushback, but they're working on it. And then maybe there was some pushback from the people that were there. But and so this was an encouragement to Zerubbabel. I think it was meant to be an encouragement to Zerubbabel, that was saying that him, look, it's not by might or power, anything that you can do, but it's by the Spirit of God that this is all going to be taken care of. And my old friend J. Vernon McGee translated this part of the clause of this. He says, the not by might, not by power, but my Spirit, says the Lord. And he says, it's not by brawn nor by brain. And so it's um, that was a good, not brawn and not brain. So and this whole idea of not by might or power, but my spirit, it's kind of a motto. It's an elliptical sentence, if you were, but because it it guides all endeavors and enterprises of a nation in these evil days. That we have to remember that there are things that are going on in our world today that we say, well, we need to do this or that and the other, and we could, um, uh, our own nation is one now. We had 4 years of someone that was clueless, and then we get somebody that, some things maybe he is clueless about, but he's doing things. And so people start thinking about, well, that's a guy and he's accomplishing it. But really, in the end, nothing that man does is going to accomplish a whole lot unless the Lord is there with him, and that it's His Spirit. If God's Spirit is in it, then it will succeed. If God's Spirit is not in it, it's going to be very, very difficult to succeed. And so I think this week I've been reading about how that now some people are coming out of the woodwork talking about how that um, uh, the during this 2 years after October 7th, and culminating there with that airstrike from the B-2 bombers on the Iranian nuclear mountain there, and they what that did was that shut down Iran from further hostilities for the time being. And by so doing, the United States has blessed Israel in a way. All right. And so, and I believe that was kind of an inspired operation to do that, because the pushback on the president going in there and bombing Iran like that, he knew it was going to be a punishing pushback, but he did it anyway. And what it did then, it was saved countless lives in the Middle East, because had Iran been able to perfect their nuclear weapons, millions would have died. And so um, I believe that was one of those things. It was not by might, by our power. It may seem like it was, but I think that was guided by God's hand. That the Iranians didn't ever they never saw it coming. They were looking at the group of bombers that were out there in Guam, or Guam or Diego Garcia. I can't remember. I think Guam, because I used to live there. But they were watching those guys and thinking, okay, as long as they're still sitting there on the runway in Guam, we're safe. Zap! The bombers came from the east, or came from the United States and flew east into Iran and destroyed it. So there again, that I believe it looked like might and power, but I do believe that God had a hand in that. And that's what he's telling Zerubbabel here. Yeah, you're going to have to work. Where I'm not going to build this temple by myself, and God put out there and make all the blocks stand up, and you wake up in the morning like and God's little elves had gone in there and put out more bricks. No, they're going to have to build it, but just the idea of putting it together properly, and the workmanship, and keeping the naysayers at bay, that's all had to be supplied by God's Spirit, and that his Spirit strengthened the workers to the point that they could continue on. So um, I hope that kind of makes some sense out of all of that. That all this work on the temple there could succeed only through supernatural grace or help from the Lord through His Holy Spirit. And of course, this is, like I mentioned before, this is how we should work in this world today. If we bless Israel as a nation, we also will be blessed. And so I believe that with every fiber of my core here. So going ahead on verse 7. What are you, great mountain? Before Zerubbabel, you will become a plain. He will bring out the capstone with shouts of grace, grace to it. All right, so this is one of those deals that, okay, what is the great mountain? A mountain is a in this case, the mountain that they're talking about is that the project of building this temple. If any of you have ever been involved in a large building project, um, um, I don't know about, I'm just looking down the line here of some of the people that are in the class tonight that have you ever been involved in building something really, really big, or maintaining something really, really big? I know Ed Greenwood does, and I know Joseph Jones has had those kind of things. Same with Alan, who used to be in charge of all of the ice patrols and iceberg stuff for the Coast Guard, and actually for the entire world, just about. But we understand these big projects and how they can, you can just bump up against it and they're not going to move. But the project that is the mountain here is rebuilding that temple with all of its problems. They didn't have enough people. They didn't have enough particular resources, because they had squandered their resources over the 16 years. So then they had to go back out and get some more stuff and bring it in to build the temple. And so it was just a monumental task. But the Lord is saying here to Zerubbabel, okay, it is going to be just flattened. That mountain is going to be flattened, and you're going to be able to go in there and rebuild the temple. It's going to be successful. And then at the end of the day, after all of these problems that you got, it's going to be a victorious ending, and that you'll be able to put the capstone on it, and basically the finishing thing. If you ever see some of the um, architecture, the ancient architecture that they had, that where they had these arches, where the um, stones are cut and they lean on each other, and so they've got forms underneath them to keep them in place. But there, right at the very end, they put this capstone right at the top of an arch, and once they put that in, wedge it in there, and put the mortar around it, then they can take the forms out from under, and just the weight of the stones and the structure of the stones hold up the arch, and that's kind of what they're talking about here, the capstone that is put in place. And so a lot of people will look at the visions of Zechariah here and see that, okay, Yeshua, the Messiah, is the capstone because of all of world history and God's redemptive program from Genesis all the way through Revelation is going to be culminating with the Messiah coming back to the earth. And I believe after the uh, great tribulation, other people say before, and some people in the middle, and whatever. But eventually, he's going to come back, and he's going to defeat the nations that are up against Israel, and usher in the millennial period, and that's where he will rule and reign from Jerusalem, from the holy temple that will have been rebuilt, and a temple that's rebuilt without hands. Okay, now that temple there will be a miraculous temple. And so Yeshua will be ruling from there. And so, yeah, we could look at that, the idea of the second temple being completed with the capstone, and that is same with Yeshua, where he's going to be at the a new temple in the millennial period, and he will be the capstone, the thing that finishes it off and makes it great. All right, so. Oh, you guys are quiet tonight. All right. So again, the word of Adonai came to me saying, the hands of Zerubbabel have laid the foundation of this house. His hands will also finish it. Then you will know that Adonai has sent me to you. Um, so Zechariah is telling him here concerning Zerubbabel. Now um, he was there to start the rebuilding of the temple, and so there are some. If you read Ezra, um, it in five Ezra 5:16, I think it where it says, well, the temple was started by Sheshbazzar, and then later on in Ezra 3, or in Ezra 3 and 8 and Zechariah 4:9, it gives Zerubbabel the credit for doing it. So probably that Zerubbabel is going to finish the work that was begun by both Sheshbazzar and Zerubbabel, that they had started it, and so um, what this to me means is that there's continuity, that God has said, okay, this is the project, and we're going to go into that project, and you're going to stay in that project until it is finished. You're going to see the finished product. There's very few things worse than getting into a major project and it's started by one person, and then um, they remove that person and put somebody else in there, a project manager. And boy, there is a lot of lost time and effort and resources when you do that. It always happens that way. I've been in enough major building projects, building offshore drilling rigs over the years that you don't, that old saying, you don't change horses in the middle of the stream. And so God is saying, okay, Zerubbabel, you started this thing and you're going to be able to finish it, because again, going back to that, not by might, not by power, but by my spirit, you're going to finish this thing off. So that had to be a great encouragement to Zerubbabel and the people that were working around him. And so, and it was a good long project. It started in 536 BC, and then the last stone, the capstone, was put in place in 515 BC. And so the date on this particular oracle is sort of unclear, but it probably, or maybe possibly, came in 519, about 4 years before it was actually finished. So, but to me, this all means that that God was putting his stamp of approval on Zerubbabel and say, "You're going to finish this out, bud. You're going to be able to see the project through to the end." And I promise you that if you've ever been on big projects, being able to see it to the end and know that okay, it's done, it's completed. And for us, some of us, to see the ship sail away, or see the drilling rig sail away, or something like that on its maiden voyage, then that's a great feeling that you were able to start it that very first day and then finish it off several years later, and it works, and it would work its way through. All right, so verse 10, for who despises the day of small things? These seven, which are the eyes of Adonai that run back and forth throughout the whole earth, will rejoice when they see the plumb line in Zerubbabel's hand. All right, so what in the world does that mean? About despising the day of small things. Now, that's something that we have to sometimes encourage ourselves about, because when we start projects, say, well, in February of this coming February, we will have been Tree of Life congregation, the one that I'm in right now. We started that in February 2016, and we had like 15 people, including me and my wife, and we started that with our service, our congregation. We started out around two oblong tables in a cafeteria in a corner of a church, and that's how we started Tree of Life Messianic Congregation. And from there, then we're bumping up a little bit, around 100, a little bit over 100 some days. And so it was a small thing. And so, but then what are the seven things? Okay, these seven. Well, that is remember in verse, or chapter 3 and verse 9, where they talk about the seven faceted stone that the Lord had prepared. Well, and it said the facets or eyes. That's another translation of it. So basically, the eyes of the Lord is going to look all over the world, and then basically the people of the world, or the Jewish people, the Israelites, are going to look at now when Zerubbabel finishes that temple, and he's hanging the plumb line to get everything right, straight up and down, and he's in progress. And so in this case, he's getting ready for that capstone, where it goes in just in the right spot, because if it's not in the right spot, if it's swayed to one side or the other, then that arch may or may not fail. But if it's right directly where it's supposed to be, the forces on that capstone are equal on either side and all the way down in the arch, then it will stand. And there are multiple places over there in Israel, and places I've been in, other antique, Rome and places like that, where things that were built thousands of years ago, because they did it right, they were still standing today. They have not been rebuilt or restored. They're still standing there today, 2,000 to 2,500 years later. It's just incredible in some places. So, um, so that's where he's talking about the eyes of the Lord looking all over and watching every part of this program, and he says, so don't despise these days of small things, because you have to start out small. Nobody starts out, building a big building or a skyscraper by coming in there and slapping up, 1/4 of the thing on this side and 1/4 on the other, and doing it that way. No, you start at the bottom and you basically you dig down very, very, very deep to have a good foundation, and you start building up block by block by block. If you've ever had kids where you had what do you call those things? Okay, I can't even think of the little blocks that they build right now, and I know they're very painful when you step on them at night in your bare feet. Um, but uh, so somebody help me out there. What's the name of that?
Legos.
Legos. Yeah, there you go. Thanks, Joseph. So, but that's, how you do that, just one block on the other and you build it up. And so that's the way organizations are. That's the way churches are, synagogues are. You have to start small. We don't start out with 1,000 people for a congregation. No, we started out with 15 and now we're at about 100. And so that's in some people's cases it's still small, but for us, we're very pleased with what the Lord has blessed us with at this point. So, but Bible history is full of God using small things. The whole deal of the history of Israel started out with a little baby named Isaac, and then later on they got out of Egypt, started out with a little baby in a basket. And if you ever think of things that are that your own life is all messed up and everything, just remember that baby Moses started out as a basket case himself. So, and then you had the little guy that had a lunch, 5 loaves and 2 fish, and so he fed or through Yeshua, he fed 5,000 people, and just all sorts of little things like that. So I think Wiersbe said, never despise the day of small things, for God is glorified in small things and uses them to accomplish great things. And my bud there, J. Vernon McGee, says, for who hath despised the day of small things? He said, I can tell you who has. We despise the day of small things. We Americans are impressed with the big and the brassy. We like our Christian work to be a success story, and we measure success by the size of the building and the crowds that come to it. Well, I am becoming more and more convinced that the Lord is working in quiet ways and in quiet places today. And yeah, it's not the size of the building that is an indicator of God's spirit in that building. I can tell you that, because we've had some wonderful services just with us and 50, 60 people. And one of my friends, he showed a picture of his congregation out in Del Rio or El Paso, wherever it is. He's I think Del Rio, and it's I think it's smaller than ours. And they were talking about how the Spirit of the Lord had moved through their congregation this last weekend, and that's what it's all about right there. So, all right, so going ahead, we got to finish off here. Then I responded by asking, what are these two olive trees on the right and on the left of the menorah? Again, I asked him, what are these two olive branches besides the two pipes that empty the golden oil out of them? All right, so Zechariah is still kind of unclear on this whole thing as to what all that means. He wanted to know the meaning, and he was not afraid to ask. Even the angel looked at him and says, later on, you don't know what these are. But anyway, he's asking, what are these things? What's the meaning? And this idea of the golden oil, and the zahav is the word, but for gold. But anyway, it's probably a clear clear olive oil, something that it is olive oil, but it's kind of that golden color. When it's the purity of it is just uh, beyond measure, and so that's what they're talking about there is the golden oil from that only God can supply, and so. Going ahead with that verse there, it says, "You do not know what these are." The angel again asking him and says, and um, hopefully the angel is just being nice and say, "You don't know what these are," instead of, "Hey, you dummy, what's wrong with you?" Uh, no, it says, "You don't know what these are." Well, um, no, he didn't know what they were, and he seemed surprised that Zechariah was still needing an explanation. But um, it's sometimes the Lord wants us to figure things out for ourselves by just watching him and trusting him so that he doesn't have to tell you, "Okay, I want you to go and do this, and this is what's going to happen to you, and don't worry about it. On the 13th of next month, then somebody's going to just about T-bone you at a red light over there, and so I want you to be worried about, don't worry about that, but I will take care of it." No, God doesn't work that way very much. He wants us to trust him to go through what he wants us to do. And but what I like about Zechariah, he had no pretense at all. He didn't know the answer. Then he's going to ask the question, "What does this mean?" And that's something that, for me, it's a guide for me too. That if I don't know something, um, try to find out the answer. And so, he admitted, "I don't know. I just don't know." So anyway, last verse. So then he said, "These are the two anointed ones who are standing by the Lord of the whole earth." Now, all right, so we finally got the mystery solved. Who are the two anointing ones? Okay, that is obviously that is Zerubbabel and Joshua, because he's talking about right now at this time. And is there something that they're talking about later on in the Great Tribulation period? Possibly so, but I think that may be a stretch, but because he's talking about um, that these two branches, these two guys there, uh, is literally the anointed ones. They're literally the sons of oil. Anointed means that actually anointed a Mashiach. Like we talk about Yeshua being the Mashiach. Uh, well, it means just anointed. Saul, the first king, was anointed. David was anointed. In that regard, both of them were Mashiachs. Cyrus, the Persian, he was anointed by God to let the people go back to Israel. So in that regard, it said he was anointed. He was a Mashiach, and so. But what this is, I believe, is that it's showing that God had Israel, both the secular, the king side of it, and the religious, the temple worship and sacrificial system, both working side by side, supplying the oil, the sustenance that Israel would need to prosper. And so, then again, this also points to the Messiah, where you got the king and the priest, and between those two entities and between those two offices, Yeshua supplies everything that we will need, especially when we get to that millennial period. and that it's going to be just a period of um, great joy and worth. And so, um, but the bottom line on this whole thing is that God can take the impossible and He can turn it around and bring it to a successful conclusion. They had been in exile for 70 years. They came back. The temple wasn't going very well. God said, "Okay, come on, guys, let's jump in here and get it done." And it brought it to a successful conclusion. And they had in what 515 BC, and so the temple was restored. It was built, and they could then go in and start doing the sacrifice. They do the sacrificial system that brought the people in right relationship with the Lord. All right, so all right, we that's what I had for tonight. We're a couple of minutes over with, but comments or questions, Joseph?
Yes, sir. Rabbi, and you don't have to answer tonight, but I was just wondering. Started with your question. You were thinking about who were the people there when when they returned from Babylon, and I said, oh, I guess some of the Samaritans were there, and then I found out that the Samaritans were trying to help build the temple, but they were rebuffed. And you don't have to talk about it tonight, but I know that may come in later. But if you have just a few comments, either now or later, on why the Samaritans were rebuffed and what does that mean for us and our understanding of the Lord's way, and there's always been that rub between the Northern Kingdom and Judah, and I just wondered if that's plays a role in it or what. I'm just a little confused, and maybe you can add some light.
Um, and that's one of those kind of things, Joseph. I'm going to be like Zechariah. I don't know the answer right off the top of my head. I
No,
will have to.
I figured it was maybe not, but I just you were asking,
Yeah,
you were
yeah.
saying who were the people that were there when they came back, and I said, well, yeah, who were the people? And I saw some reference to the Samaritans, and then I saw the Samaritans wanted to really help them build the temple, and Zerubbabel and I guess Joshua and the rest said, nope, not you're not going to do this. We're going to do it. But I don't know,
Well, I
what's
think
going
that
on.
um, yeah, right off the top of my head, what that would be is that at that point, the returnees from Babylon did not regard the Samaritans as chosen people at that point because their bloodlines had been so watered down that they didn't feel like that the Samaritans were worthy. And I'll have to
Oh,
look,
okay,
but
okay,
let me research that a little bit
sure, no
because
problem.
that's a
I
great
just
question. That's a great question, and I'm not going to make make something up to make me sound good.
Yeah,
I
no,
don't
no.
know the answer.
I just appreciate you bringing light to it because, like, how many
Yeah.
times have I read Zechariah and that never even thought of this? So I really appreciate the lesson and the words from the Lord. Amen.
Okay. Well, thanks. So, you hadn't heard any more from Ed Clark since Friday.
No, no. I just shared with Alan that he's in failing health, and maybe Alan can join us on Fridays. So
Yeah.
that's it. Nothing more.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. Okay. Any other comments or questions? I'm going to go ahead and um, close out the what do you call that YouTube um, deal.
Rabbi Steve,
Yes,
oh, quick question. Oh, are you there?
I'm here.
Oh, okay, okay. Thanks. Real quick. Yeah, I appreciate the lesson too. Yeah, and I hadn't really thought about we were talking about Jesus. I just hadn't thought about him being the capstone and the cornerstone, right? Is
Yeah.
that okay?
Well, and it's
That's it.
yeah, he's okay. Capstone, cornerstone. He's that found
I found,
that
yeah.
the one that begins the construction. and the
Mhm.
capstone is the one that finished it. What did he say?
Finished
He was the Alpha and the
Mhm.
Omega.
Omega.
Yeah, no, I hadn't even. I mean, I've heard those before, but just hadn't put them together like that. So, yeah,
Mhm.
appreciate that. Yeah.
All right. Good, good. All right. Any other things? I don't know what happened with the YouTube, because I'm not finding it here where I can even jump off of it, because maybe it's already closed out. I don't know. Some of this stuff, there's just too many buttons to push. So, um, any other comments or questions anybody might have? All right, then we will shut her down and oh, I know what I got to do. I got to stop the share. Once I stop the share, then I can